The ground trembles. Something massive moves through ancient waters, its head wrapped in bone so thick that nothing alive can pierce it. Millions of years later, a giant creature crosses an Ice Age plain, carrying armor that weighs half a ton. These are not myths. These animals really existed, and their defenses were so powerful that scientists call them bulletproof. But what made them this way, and why did nature create living tanks? Around 360 million years ago, the oceans of Earth looked nothing like they do today. The Late Devonian period was a time when fish ruled the seas, and the biggest, meanest predator in those dark waters was Dunkleosteus. This was not your average fish. Dunkleosteus grew up to 4 to 6 meters long, which is about 13 to 20 feet. Some scientists think certain individuals might have been even larger, but size was not the only thing that made Dunkleosteus terrifying. The front half of its body was covered in thick plates of bone that acted like natural armor. These bone plates were serious protection. In some places, they measured 5 to 7 centimeters thick, which is about 2 to 3 inches of solid bone. The thickest plate, called the nuchal plate, sat at the back of the skull like a protective shield. If you tried to bite through that, you would break your teeth. Few creatures in the Devonian seas could even scratch Dunkleosteus, let alone hurt it. This fish was basically wearing a helmet and chest plate made of bone, and it was built right into its body. Scientists say this armor was so tough that if Dunkleosteus lived today, it might come close to being actually bulletproof. Of course, there were no bullets back then, but the comparison shows just how incredible this natural armor was. But Dunkleosteus was not just a slow, heavily armored fish that sat on the ocean floor. New fossil evidence changed what scientists thought about this creature. Paleontologists found remains of fast-swimming prey near Dunkleosteus fossils, which suggests this armored predator could actually chase down quick animals. It was not the sluggish bottom feeder people once believed. Instead, Dunkleosteus was an active hunter, a swift killer in a suit of armor. The really scary part was its mouth. Dunkleosteus did not have regular teeth. Instead, it had razor-sharp, bony blades that were actually part of its jaw armor. When those jaws snapped shut, the blades worked like giant scissors, shearing through flesh and bone. Scientists have calculated that Dunkleosteus had a bite force of about 6,000 newtons, which equals roughly 21,000 pounds per square inch. That is similar to the bite force of a modern crocodile. With that kind of power, Dunkleosteus could bite straight through bone and even through the armored bodies of other fish. Even heavily protected prey stood little chance once those jaws closed around them. In the Devonian seas, Dunkleosteus was the apex predator. Nothing could really challenge it. A school of smaller fish would scatter in panic when this massive predator appeared. Dunkleosteus could open its jaws suddenly, creating powerful suction that pulled prey right into its mouth. The armor on its head meant that other predators could not fight back effectively. Any bite from another creature would just bounce off those thick skull plates. Dunkleosteus was essentially half fish, half tank, and it dominated its world. Interestingly, Dunkleosteus might have been its own worst enemy. Fossil evidence suggests this species practiced cannibalism. Scientists have found gouged Dunkleosteus bone fragments that might have come from the stomachs of other Dunkleosteus. This means they sometimes attacked and ate their own kind. Maybe they were the only prey tough enough to provide a real challenge. When you are the biggest, baddest thing in the ocean, sometimes you have to fight your own species for food or territory. The back half of Dunkleosteus is mostly a mystery because those parts rarely fossilized. Scientists think the rear was probably more slender with a strong tail for swimming. Based on smaller relatives, paleontologists believe Dunkleosteus might have had a shark-like tail to push its heavy armored front through the water. If you could see one swimming toward you, the first thing you would notice was the massive head shield and that gaping mouth full of bone blades. The front was a fortress, while the back was built for speed. This combination made Dunkleosteus a perfect predator. One fascinating detail shows that even mighty Dunkleosteus had limits. Those powerful jaws could slice prey into pieces, But bones and armor shards are hard to digest. Scientists found clusters of semi-digested bones near Dunkleosteus fossils and figured out that this predator probably threw up the parts it could not digest. After gulping down a large prehistoric shark, Dunkleosteus would later spit out the bones and scales, much like an owl coughs up pellets of fur and bone. Even the toughest predator in the sea had to deal with indigestion. Dunkleosteus went extinct by the end of the Devonian period when a mass extinction event wiped out many marine species, but its legacy remains as one of the most formidable armored predators in the history of Earth. With thick bone armor and devastating jaws, Dunkleosteus showed how effective natural protection and weaponry could make an animal nearly untouchable in its environment. Now we jump forward in time, way forward, to about 30,000 years ago during the Ice Age. The scene shifts from ancient oceans to the open plains of South America. In the tall grass, a creature that looks like an armored boulder slowly makes its way across the landscape, munching on plants. This is Glyptodon, an extinct relative of modern armadillos, but far bigger and way more heavily protected. Glyptodon measured about 2 to 3 meters long, which is roughly 6 to 10 feet, and weighed between 400 and 1,000 kilograms. That is anywhere from 880 to 2,200 pounds. It looked like a giant armadillo with a huge domed shell on its back. This shell, called a carapace, was made of hundreds of bony plates called osteoderms that fused together tightly. The result was a rigid curved shield that covered its shoulders, back and sides like a natural tank. For the predators of the Ice Age, which included terrifying beasts like the saber-toothed cat Smilodon, huge short-faced bears called Arctotherium, packs of dire wolves, and even terror birds, Glyptodon was extremely tough to kill. Its shell could be over 2.5 centimeters thick in places, which is about an inch of solid bone. That is a fortress. Even its head had a shield of bone on top, and small armor pieces called ossicles protected its face and cheeks. Some Glyptodon fossils show that armor even covered parts of their legs and tail. When Glyptodon tucked itself close to the ground, almost every angle was defended by bone. Scientists have said that Glyptodonts, the family that includes Glyptodon, were literally some of the toughest mammals of all time. If you could somehow travel back in time and shoot a low-caliber gun at a Glyptodon shell, the bullet might actually bounce off. There is even a modern story about a smaller armadillo whose armor deflected a bullet, and Glyptodon's shell was way thicker than that. While not truly impervious to every weapon, in its Ice Age world, Glyptodon's armor was practically bulletproof against natural predators. Think about a hungry Smilodon stalking a Glyptodon. The big cat springs forward, trying to drive its long fangs into its prey. But those fangs just scrape uselessly against the hard, curved shell. Frustrated, the Smilodon circles, searching for a weak spot. Glyptodon hunkers down, pulling in its vulnerable parts. Its soft belly stays low to the ground, and the cat cannot flip this living shield because Glyptodon weighs as much as a small car. Paleontologists believe predators, like Smilodon, had a really hard time killing adult Glyptodonts. Fossil evidence of successful predation is extremely rare. One remarkable fossil shows a young Glyptodon relative with 2 puncture holes in its skull, exactly the size of Smilodon's canine teeth. This juvenile apparently fell victim to a big cat, likely because it was young and its armor had not fully hardened yet. The fact that finds like this are so rare suggests that adult Glyptodonts usually stayed safe. Their armor really worked. Most predators would rather hunt easier prey than waste energy on a walking boulder. As predators became more dangerous, Glyptodon evolved extra defenses to keep up. Some Glyptodon fossils show something really cool. They have a fringe of bony spikes along the edges of the shell. These spikes, or shell knobs, stuck out from the rim of the carapace. In 2 South American Glyptodon species, called Glyptodon reticulatus and Glyptodon munizi, scientists found rows of small spikes along the sides and larger spines protecting the neck area. These spiky pieces were probably covered in a tough, horny sheath in life, making them even longer and sharper. Any predator trying to bite Glyptodon's vulnerable areas like its neck or legs would get jabbed by spikes. Researchers think this was an evolutionary arms race. When South America's predators got bigger and meaner during the Great American Interchange, which happened when northern carnivores like big cats and bears moved south, Glyptodonts responded by adding more spikes and growing larger. Glyptodon basically became an even more spiked tank to stay ahead of the hunters. Despite all that armor, Glyptodon was a peaceful plant eater. It ate coarse plants, grasses, and maybe fruits. Its teeth were simple and grooved, which is how it got its name, meaning grooved tooth. It had a broad turtle-like beak for cutting vegetation. A family of Glyptodonts probably moved slowly across the plains, grazing like armored cattle. They did not need to run fast because safety came from standing their ground under that armored dome. Their legs were thick and their posture was low, perfect for supporting weight and staying stable when under attack. Early humans who entered the Americas might have met Glyptodonts. Some fossils suggest humans hunted Glyptodonts or scavenged their shells around 12,000 years ago. There is even speculation that Paleo-Indians might have used empty Glyptodon shells as shelters. While we cannot be sure this happened often, the idea shows just how large and sturdy these shells were. A Glyptodon carapace was like a giant half-dome. Flip one over and you have a ready-made roof. Glyptodon vanished in the mass extinctions at the end of the Ice Age, around 10,000 to 12,000 years ago, when climate change and human pressures wiped out many giant mammals. But in its time, Glyptodon was a triumph of natural armor. It proves that bulletproof protection is not just fantasy. Evolution created an animal that was about as hard to kill as a tank. When you see a modern armadillo today, remember its ancient cousin who did not need to run because almost nothing could break through its defenses. If you are enjoying learning about these incredible armored creatures, consider subscribing so you do not miss out on more amazing prehistoric stories. There is so much more to discover about the ancient world. While Glyptodon was like an armored truck, there was another creature that took things further. Doedicurus was a battle tank with a built-in weapon. Doedicurus was another giant Glyptodont that lived in South America during the Pleistocene, at the same time as Glyptodon. Think of Doedicurus as Glyptodon's meaner, more aggressive cousin. It had the same basic body plan with a huge domed shell of bony armor, but Doedicurus added something spectacular. At the end of its tail was a massive spiked club. On a South American savanna about 20,000 years ago, two male Doedicurus might have lumbered into a clearing. Each weighed over 1.5 to 2 tons and measured about 4 meters or 13 feet long. That is as big as a car and as heavy as a rhinoceros. Both were covered by huge shells of bony armor. As they faced each other, maybe competing over territory or a female, they began swinging their back ends side to side. At the end of each tail was a club of solid bone shaped like a hand, studded with spikes. Suddenly they charged and clashed. The tail clubs swung like giant hammers. The clubs collided with each other or slammed into armored sides with bone-rattling crashes. This is not made up. Fossil evidence backs it up. Scientists have found Doedicurus shells with dented or fractured osteoderms that match impacts from other Doedicurus tail clubs. These giants really did fight each other in armored combat. Their shells evolved to withstand huge blows, not just from predators, but from their own kind. It was like two medieval knights in full armor, except the knights were the size of horses and used tail hammers instead of swords. The tail club of Doedicurus was one of the most impressive weapons in the animal kingdom. This bony club could weigh about 40 to 65 kilograms all by itself, which is as much as an adult human. It was supported by thick tailbones that fused into a stiff rod perfect for swinging. The end of the club was covered with spikes or knobs. Research shows that the largest spikes were positioned at just the right spot to deliver maximum damage on impact, the sweet spot of the swing. When Doedicurus swung its tail, which could reach speeds of about 11 meters per second or 40 kilometers per hour, it was like a giant hammer coming down. A direct hit could break bone. If Doedicurus managed to strike the leg of an attacking predator, It might shatter the predator's shin or foot, crippling it. Paleontologist Victoria Arbour calculated that a similar dinosaur could deliver an impact with 4,800 newton-seconds of impulse, which is way more force than a professional baseball swing. Doedicurus, with its heavy club, would have been just as powerful. If a predator like a big cat or bear dared to attack, one good swing of that tail could knock the predator unconscious or snap its bones. Interestingly, scientists think Doedicurus used its tail club more for fighting its own kind than defending against predators. Why? Consider the anatomy. Doedicurus had poor peripheral vision. Its shell and helmet-like skull meant it could not easily see behind itself or to the side. Swinging a tail blindly at a fast-moving Smilodon would be difficult. Predators might also have been smart enough to avoid the dangerous end of the tail and attack from the front. But when two Doedicurus faced each other, they could line up side by side, swinging at each other in a more predictable contest over territory or mates. The injuries found on fossils support this idea. The damage matches the power of a tail strike, and the shells seem built to absorb these powerful blows. Doedicurus evolved a hammer and armor system where its shell could take a hit and its tail could deliver one. That does not mean predators had it easy. A pack of Ice Age hyenas or a lone Smilodon eyeing a Doedicurus would face a serious challenge. The predator would circle, trying to find a gap in the armor. Doedicurus would keep its vulnerable parts low, with its sturdy shell presenting a curved bony wall. If threatened, it could swing that tail defensively. Even a glancing blow from a 45-kilogram club would deter most carnivores. Doedicurus was special among glyptodonts, being among the largest and sporting one of the most formidable clubs. The name Doedicurus even means pestle tail, referring to the tail's shape like a grinding tool. The armor of Doedicurus was very similar to glyptodons. It had a rigid shell made of fused osteoderms, forming a giant dome over its body. The shell of a large Doedicurus could be over a meter thick from front to back and cover an area the size of a dining table. The shell fused to the spine and hips, creating a solid tank hull around the animal. Doedicurus also had a smaller dome or bone covering on the shoulders, which might have stored fat or provided extra protection for the neck and shoulder area. The combination of the big dome and this forward shield meant an attacking predator had almost no good angle to bite without hitting bone. Its head was protected by armor on top, and it likely had some bony protection on its cheeks and nose. The tail, except for the flexible base, had armored rings leading up to the club, protecting everything except where it needed to bend. Despite looking like a war machine, Doedicurus was a plant eater. It had simple teeth for grinding plants and probably ate tough grasses like Glyptodon. Some scientists even think large glyptodonts might have had a short trunk or long snout to help gather food, almost like a tiny elephant trunk. This idea comes from skull openings that might indicate strong facial muscles, but it is not confirmed. Whether or not it had a trunk, Doedicurus was definitely not a predator. Its weapons were purely for defense or fighting rivals. Doedicurus lived alongside early humans, and humans might have hastened its extinction by hunting. By about 10,000 years ago, these giants disappeared along with other megafauna. A dead Doedicurus would have been valuable, offering a huge amount of meat and a ready-made shelter or boat from its shell. But hunting a healthy Doedicurus would have been extremely dangerous. It was a living tank with a wrecking ball on its tail. Any group of human hunters would need to be very careful to avoid that swinging club. Perhaps they trapped them or ambushed them during sleep, because a direct attack would be risky. Some legends suggest humans might have used glyptodont shells after the animals died, showing how impressive those structures were. Doedicurus shows another level of prehistoric armor. Not only bulletproof style protection, but also a built-in weapon to smash threats. If Glyptodon relied on hunkering down, Doedicurus could actively fight back. In evolution, sometimes defense and offense develop together. In Doedicurus, nature created a creature that was both a hammer-wielding gladiator and an armored tank. Our final armored powerhouse takes us even further back in time to the late Cretaceous period about 76 million years ago. In what is now the Alberta region of Canada, a four-legged plant-eating dinosaur moves through a forest. It is built low and wide, almost like someone crossed a crocodile with a bulldozer. This is Euoplocephalus, one of the largest members of the ankylosaur family of dinosaurs. Euoplocephalus was so well protected by armor that people often call it a living tank. Even its eyelids had bony coverings. Euoplocephalus had armored eyes thanks to small bones called palpebrals that acted like bony eyelids. When even your eyeballs have armor, you are definitely built for survival. Euoplocephalus measured about 5 to 6 meters long, which is around 17 to 20 feet, and weighed roughly 2 tons, as heavy as a large vehicle. It walked on all fours with a broad, low stance. Its belly was only maybe a couple of feet off the ground, and its back was as wide as a dining table. Covering the top of its back, sides and tail was a coat of thick osteoderms, forming continuous armor. These bone plates came in different shapes and sizes. Some were large oval plates with high ridges, arranged in rows along the sides and back. Its neck had 2 armored bone rings that circled like a collar, protecting the vulnerable neck area. Along the sides, Euoplocephalus had spikes and smaller bumps like a studded jacket that discouraged bites. The skull was a solid mass of bone with most openings closed up and reinforced. It had bony plates over the cheeks and a beak at the front for clipping plants. From nose to tail tip, above and to the sides, Euoplocephalus was an armored fortress. A hungry predator like a tyrannosaur would find no soft spot except the belly, and Euoplocephalus's flat stance made that nearly impossible to reach. Like Doedicurus, Euoplocephalus was not just passively armored, it was armed. Its tail had the famous ankylosaur club. The last part of the tail had vertebrae fused and stiffened by ossified tendons, turning it into a solid handle. At the tip, several large osteoderms fused together to form a heavy knob or club, roughly the size of a medicine ball or basketball. This tail club in big ankylosaurs could be around 60 centimeters or 2 feet wide and very dense. Fossil studies suggest these swings could break bones. Scientists have proposed that ankylosaurs like Euoplocephalus could shatter the leg bones of attacking carnivores by swinging their clubs low to the ground. A well-aimed swing at a predator's legs could cripple a tyrannosaur relative like Albertosaurus or Gorgosaurus, which lived at the same time as Euoplocephalus. Those predators stood tall on 2 legs. An ankylosaur's best target would be to smash the legs out from under the attacker, and Euoplocephalus's club was at the right height and had enough power to do that. A charging Albertosaurus, 3 tons of muscle and teeth, coming at Euoplocephalus would face a serious challenge. The armored dinosaur might sense the approach through smell or sound. It could turn its back end toward the threat, tense up, and at the last moment swing its tail with all its strength. If the club connected with the theropod's shin, it could snap the bone with a crack. Suddenly, the fearsome predator would collapse, unable to continue the fight. If the tyrannosaur tried a frontal assault, Euoplocephalus could pivot, keeping its tail toward the attacker like a medieval flail ready to strike. Whether such dramatic battles routinely happened is debated. Paleontologist Victoria Arbour, an expert on ankylosaurs, looked for evidence of combat damage on ankylosaur fossils. Surprisingly, clear signs of shattered predator bones or smashed ankylosaur armor from fights are rare in the fossil record. It could be that such encounters were infrequent or just rarely preserved. Some scientists have suggested that the elaborate armor and clubs might have been used for display or fights between rivals, like showing off to mates or shoving matches, as much as for defense. The truth might be a mix. Euoplocephalus certainly could defend itself, but it probably did not have to fight all the time. Often the presence of such armor would deter predators from even trying. Like a porcupine whose quills act as a warning, a full-grown Euoplocephalus was a walking deterrent. A hungry Gorgosaurus might think twice and hunt a duck-billed dinosaur instead of messing with the spiky club-tailed tank. The name Euoplocephalus means well-armored head, which fits perfectly. Even the eye region had extra bones that may have acted like bony eyelids or brow armor. Its whole design was low, flat, and broad to maximize stability. A toppled ankylosaur would be in trouble, so being hard to flip was crucial. Short, powerful legs kept it grounded. This dinosaur moved slowly, browsing on low plants. It had a wide mouth, suitable for gathering up ferns and bushes. You can almost see a group of Euoplocephalus moving like armored trucks through the Cretaceous forest, munching peacefully. Only when danger approached would their behavior change, shifting into defensive mode with armor ready and tails prepared to swing. To understand how complete Euoplocephalus's protection was, consider that even its belly might have had small armor scales, though not large plates. The belly was perhaps the only somewhat vulnerable spot, which explains why ankylosaurs were so flat. Predators could not easily get underneath to bite. The topside armor included not just plates but sometimes pointed spikes over the shoulders or along the sides for added defense. Some related ankylosaurs had long shoulder spikes, though Euoplocephalus itself had more horn-like bumps on the sides of its head and shorter spiky osteoderms along the body. All of this meant that an attacking carnivore had to navigate a minefield of spikes and hard surfaces. If it bit down on Euoplocephalus, it risked breaking its teeth on bone. Some Tyrannosaurus rex skulls, a cousin species that lived a bit later, have been found with strange bite marks that some think could be from chomping an ankylosaur and hitting bone, though this is speculative. The point is clear: Euoplocephalus was extraordinarily well shielded. Ankylosaur dinosaurs are often called living tanks for good reason. A writer once said that Euoplocephalus looks like a dinosaur you would not want to mess with, and that might be an understatement. From snout to tail, it was a combination of passive defense and active offense, and yet all this for a plant-eater that just wanted to eat in peace. It shows how intense predation pressure was in the late Cretaceous. Plant-eaters evolved extreme defenses to survive the likes of tyrannosaurs. Euoplocephalus's strategy was the ultimate armored approach. Do not run, do not hide. Instead, turn yourself into a spiky, bone-crushing juggernaut. Predators, be warned. Euoplocephalus, along with other ankylosaurs, went extinct at the end of the Cretaceous, around 66 million years ago, in the mass extinction that also wiped out the large dinosaurs. But in its time, it was a perfect example of natural armor. Its fossils, often found with armor still in place, give paleontologists a clear picture of its appearance. Museums today reconstruct Euoplocephalus with skin and color, and they truly look like dragons or tanks brought to life. Children often marvel at the tail club and the fact that something like that really existed. Euoplocephalus proves that sometimes reality is more extreme than fantasy. From the depths of ancient oceans to the plains of the Ice Age and the forests of the dinosaur era, these four armored creatures showcase the incredible ways nature has experimented with protection. Dunkleosteus ruled the seas with a bony head shield and blade-like jaws, an apex predator in a suit of armor. Glyptodon lumbered through the Pleistocene with a fortress on its back, frustrating mighty saber-tooths and giant bears. Doedicurus turned defense into offense, swinging a bone club that could shatter bones, a true tank with a weapon. And Euoplocephalus stood as a tank-like dinosaur, its entire body an armor-plated castle with a lethal hammer on its tail. These animals lived in different eras and environments, but all share a common thread. When threatened, they could rely on their nearly bulletproof armor to survive. Their stories fire up our curiosity. We can almost hear the primeval clashes. The clang of Dunkleosteus's jaws meeting another's armor plate underwater. The thud of Doedicurus's club against a rival's shell. The frustrated roars of a predator who just broke a tooth on a glyptodont's shell. The whack of Euoplocephalus's tail knocking a tyrannosaur off balance. These vivid scenes are backed by fossils and research that paleontologists have carefully gathered. Real evidence of armored beasts that once existed. Studying these prehistoric armored animals not only entertains us with their almost fantastical abilities, but it also teaches us about evolution's creative solutions. Whether bone armor grown from skin or specialized weapons grown from tails and jaws, life has repeatedly evolved its own defenses and weapons to meet the challenges of survival. In a way, they were living fortresses, carrying their protection with them at all times. So the next time you think of armor, do not just think of medieval knights or military vehicles. Remember that hundreds of millions of years before humans, nature produced its own armored giants. They may be gone now, but their fossils tell the true story of creatures so tough that we are in awe of them to this day. These 4 bulletproof prehistoric creatures give us a glimpse of a past where the battle for life led to some of the most incredible defensive adaptations our planet has ever seen. From ocean depths to ancient forests, they moved in their powerful forms, masters of survival in their worlds and legends in ours.